Welcome back to another episode of the Twin Elements podcast, proudly presented by Venture Hunting and Outdoors. If you're like us and passionate about hunting, spearfishing, and many other outdoor-related pursuits, with an eagerness to fast-track your learning, then this podcast is perfect for you. Alrighty, legends. Well, we have an exciting one in store for you. Welcome back to another episode of the Twin Elements podcast. Today, I'll be your host, Ayden Doumtsis, and I'm actually going to be doing an interview on our fellow host, James Doumtsis. This is sort of a new style of podcast for us. We haven't really done one of these yet. We've done some film breakdowns, which this is, I guess, going to be a little bit similar to, but today we're going to be winding back the clock to a particular hunt from 2019 where James went over to Europe in the Northern Hemisphere and hunted the fallow deer rut in Bulgaria. So James ended up producing a Twin Elements film on the back of this trip called Bowhunting Bulgaria. I'm sure many of you who have followed us over the years have seen that. It's some of probably the best fallow deer running activity and footage that's been composed onto your screen. So if you haven't seen that, make sure you go back and do in fact watch it. And if you haven't, then let's use this podcast to obviously generate some excitement about it all and get you guys keen to go and watch that. As well as hopefully just break down the barriers into potentially doing a hunt like this for yourselves. I know that James obviously highly recommends it, and we'll hopefully break down a bit of his thoughts and actions and things like that over his trip to Bulgaria. So without further ado, we'll get into the podcast.
Venture Hunting and Outdoors is Australia's premier hunting retailer, with the mission to give Australian outdoorsmen and women the resource they deserve. Venture started from a team of passionate hunters and has transformed into a community. Through group events, top quality gear, exclusive deals, and expert guidance, Venture is more than a hunting store. Check out their website today to see what epic deals are available.
So with any international hunt, there's obviously going to be a lot of background and preparation. Just the logistics of it can be enough to scare people off. So I just wanted to sort of start at the beginning here. And I guess the first question to you will be, what initially attracted you to hunt fallow deer in Bulgaria specifically?
So this story is one of the benefits of social media, where you get to follow along the journey of some incredible hunters out there. And in this case, it was Brad Murphy and Benny Solaris that sort of opened the way up to Bulgarian hunting. Bulgaria itself had only just opened up bow hunting again, which it was only rifle before that. And so, they sort of pioneered the way and went and had an incredible trip. In that trip, Benny Solaris actually shot what was to become the new bow record in Bulgaria for fallow deer, which was an incredible trophy. And just some of the footage and stuff they were putting up there, I was like, this is just insane. I'd love to go and do a trip. And so I actually messaged Brad Murphy. I think he'd done a couple of podcasts too about it, just outlining it. And I just said, hey, if you guys are ever doing a trip or if you're ever putting like a group together, I'd love to go put my name down. And it wasn't a couple of months after that he sort of reached out and said, hey, you still keen? We're looking at doing a pretty big trip, have 2 weeks worth of hunters going, 4 in each group. And that sort of started the fire, I guess, and started organising plans to head over there to hunt for myself.
Yeah, and you obviously, it's interesting hearing, because I know the type of person you are, where if you say like, hey, keep me in the loop, like you're going to go and actually intend to do it. So I can imagine with, like, I know some of the caliber of hunters that went on those trips with you, it would have been pretty amazing. But I imagine when that call finally came from Brad, you were like, yep, sign me up. But what in particular actually is unique or desirable about Bulgaria as a destination for bow hunting fallow deer? Like, I can imagine being like in Europe, they've obviously got quite a rich hunting culture and things like that. And then you've obviously spoken in the first little section there about Benny Solaris going over as an Australian hunter and shooting what is to become like a Bulgarian archery record fallow deer. So straight away, like, you're obviously telling us that there's trophy quality. Can you speak a little bit more to sort of the management in Bulgaria?
So the management is crazy. Like, they, if they see, firstly, they're like so picky. if they see like a black doe or a black buck or something like that, like they want you to shoot it and they'll get you to shoot it for free because they've just got like these almost like pure bloodlines of mental, like, yeah, bucks and does, and they're beautiful animals, but they really take their management very, very, very seriously, including like culls and that type of thing. But the reason why we actually had Bulgaria as a destination, and this is something that I like never, I guess, sort of fact checked, was because Benny Solaris was living in Greece at the time, from my understanding, and working and stuff. And so he had access to a lot of Europe to go hunting. And he sort of found Bulgaria to be the best location, I guess, in terms of like there's like Italy and Hungary and like all those type of European countries as well that have fallow deer. But he found that Bulgaria was the best one price-wise for the quality of the heads. And that was something like I never sort of, I guess, like went out and fact checked. It was just that like what he sort of, found, and then subsequently went on like multiple hunts. And I don't know how that pricing has changed, but I certainly felt for like the experience that we had hunting wise, but also the care and the lodging and the food and like the cultural hunting experience, like it was definitely worth the price that we paid for it. And yeah, obviously like the trophy that we got as well was awesome.
And well, that's where my next question was going to be: what sort of research and preparation did you do before hunting in Bulgaria? But it seems like the word of mouth and the strength of relationship here between our Australian bow hunters and hunters in general was enough to obviously get you convinced. Like, obviously, I know how much you spoke to Brad Murphy. He was helping you with like your shooting and archery tips at the time as well. And then obviously having someone as knowledgeable and as successful of a hunter as Benny Solaris, like one living over there in Bulgaria and doing the intel, and then being generous enough to obviously bring all that knowledge back to an Australian audience is pretty spectacular. And like it obviously would have given you a lot of faith that you were going over there and seeing like other people previously do it, know that you're in safe hands, which makes it a bit easier. But I obviously acknowledge that any international trip is going to be a big deal, let alone like sort of flying thousands of dollars worth of bow hunting equipment to the other side of the world. Were there any specific like gear or travel preparations that you considered before leaving for this trip?
The big one really was like before I go on any international hunt now, it's all around like gear wise. It's like what type of hunt. So we were hunting out of a lodge, so that's like very easy logistic wise. You don't need your backpacking gear. Like we were in, pretty well 5-star comfort, which was awesome. The next thing obviously is like climate and temperament. So it was pretty much the same as our fallow rut here in Australia, like South Pacific sort of, where, in the days it might get up to like 15, 20 on a hot day, but in the mornings it was a bit frosty. And so I was running the Tuskier at the time, and like you had a boulder jacket on in the morning. By lunchtime, sort of early mid-morning, you're taking that off and, running around chasing croaks. It was actually so pleasant hunting wise. Like you'd have these beautiful frosty mornings, bucks croaking everywhere, and then they'd go into these like still sort of, beautiful blue sky days. So the hunting temperature wise was perfect. But those are probably the biggest factors around preparing directly for a trip in terms of like knowing what gear to bring. I guess the next one is then like how you get it over there. In that case, in that video, you'll see that I had I don't know what company makes it, but it was like a black hard case, almost like a Pelican sort of case, but a rip-off one. And it was really good. Like that bow case has seen more of Australia and done more hunts than most people will probably ever do, and worked really well. Never had too much of a problem, but you'll see in this video it sort of did. But that was the only time I ever sort of ran into a problem was on this trip, but it always protected my gear really well. I guess the thing that restricted that particular case was like when you do these international hunts, you want to fit the 32 kilos generally that you're allowed on the plane. And with that, I struggled to get more than probably like 18 kilos in it. And so on that hunt, it was fine because it was almost like I was just going on a rut hunt here in Australia, but I got rid of it probably 2.5 years ago when we started going to the US and New Zealand and those type of hunts, because I couldn't, like we've gone to I think it's a Hoyt duffel roller or something like that. Anyway, it's a fantastic, like or payload or something like that. For the weight and size of it, the amount of crap you can, put into that bag is insane. And so that's the bag that I start using now. But I used to have the hard case, which was, also really good. It was just the size restrictions. People talk about, whether you use locks, zip ties, tape, all that type of thing. I'm a bit simple. I just put zip ties on because I feel like, I don't really lock up stuff. Like generally speaking, all our more expensive things like drones and camera gear and everything, we're putting in our carry-on bag anyway. So it's mainly just all my hunting stuff in the backpack. Not to say that it's not expensive, but more like, it's going to be pretty hard to steal a couple of, pairs of pants or like a whole bow through an airport or whatever. And I just always put zip ties in another pocket and actually like write a note and have that on the bag so that it just says like more zip ties in pockets. So like if people cut it at the airport because they want to look at, and that's the thing, like that's why I don't like locks, because like you just want that little tiny barrier to entry where it like prevents the common person from looking in your bag. But like if the security guard's going to look in your bag, like they're going to cut a lock. So once that lock's cut, that's where zip ties are great, because they just cut them. You put a note in there with some more zip ties in a bag or whatever, it just says more zip ties if you need it. Well, if you get to the other side and they're still there, cool, you use them on the way home. If not, at least your bag's being resecured once they've gone, like, yeah, whatever, they've checked your stuff. So we actually did have a few, I was going to say, we didn't have too many problems actually getting over there, but the trip over was like fine. Jerry lost his bag for, Jerry Redmond lost his bag for a day and a bit, which was pretty sad. Me, Nick and Brad all got our bows, which was fortunate and lucky, but that's sort of like, with doing enough international trips now, you realize that, once you give the bag to someone at the airport, you sort of flip a coin whether you're going to get it on the other side. Have been lucky on some trips and unlucky on others.
And that's where I guess like this is probably more relatable to potentially a rifle hunter if you're going through like a guide or an outfitter, or you are doing some of these big trips. Like a bit of a habit that I've actually started getting into. It's hard with us because we're obviously filming our hunts and our trips and things. So our carry-on baggage is nearly filled to the max and overweight with camera gear. But if we weren't doing that and I was simply going over to New Zealand per se to do a hunt, I'd be wearing, like I wear my boots all the time. One, because it's easy to just show that they're clean. It's a bit of a struggle to sort of take them off and sometimes put them back on again and things like that as you go through customs. But at least that way, that if you lose, like especially more for rifle hunters where you could probably pick up, the guide's rifle or something like that, or borrow a rifle, like bows are a bit more specific. But just having your boots is going to be one of those massive things, because if you really do need to, like you don't have to go to a hunting store in New Zealand and buy another 600 pair of boots or something like that. They're already broken in if you're wearing your own. And as well as putting in like your things like your rangefinder or binoculars in your backpack, in your carry-on, because if there's like two more important things than binoculars and boots, I'd be obviously, apart from your bow or rifle, then I'd be surprised or love to hear it. But it's just one of those things that like, you probably could lose a bit of your camouflage gear. You probably could lose a bit of your, other hunting gear and wind puffers and all this type of stuff. But if you still have your binos and boots and then can borrow a rifle once you're over in that destination, you're still going to be able to go away for a hunt rather than sort of sit there and be hostage to a situation that, to be honest, like James said, you flip a coin and you can't really control it, unfortunately. But
even another thing that I've started doing after I lost my bags in the US was putting air tags in my actual main like my main bow bag or whatever. Because at least then, like I spent a day and a half in the US, like on the phone to Qantas, being like, "Hey, where's my bag?" And everyone's like, "We don't know," like and you'd sit there for an hour for some other lady at some other desk or some other fella to tell you that like they genuinely have no bag, and then like you go to Bozeman where I was flying into, and then like my bag's sitting there and they'd have no clue, where it is or whatever. So yeah, but you're 100% right. Like generally speaking, if you're wearing your boots, you put your backpack, your binos and rangefinder in your backpack. Or even me, like I had in that US trip, I had my backpack, which like it's sort of like your partner almost on the mountain. Like you learn to your backpacks fit to you, and especially on a backpack trip, like you don't want to be. There's some brilliant backpacks out there, but even if someone said, "Oh, here's like this new," like I use an Exo pack, even if someone's like, "Oh, here's this new Stone Glacier pack," like which I'm sure are brilliant packs, like it's not snug and fit to you. So that's where like exactly what Ayden's saying. Like if you have your your pair of Lowells or your pair of hunting boots, you have your binos, you have your rangefinder, and you have your backpack. Well, it's like you can borrow any pad, you can borrow any tent, you can borrow any sleeping bag. Sure, it's not going to be yours. You can borrow any camo, but it's like I'd kill for those three things and forget the rest if I had to go on a hunt. And so at least you've got them if everything else turns to shit, because there are hunts where like people don't get their bow or their rifle for like, it's a week-long hunt somewhere and like it doesn't rock up for the whole time and you're back home before you even get your bow and stuff back because they genuinely lost it. And that's where an air tag can be super helpful, because at least you can call someone and be like, "Hey, I know my bag is sitting, at Sydney or Brisbane or New Zealand or LAX or San Fran or bloody wherever you are. So, yeah.
Some good tips there for sure. Before we dive over and actually set boots on the ground in Bulgaria, I just wanted you to potentially, I don't know if there is anything to discuss here, but did anything in particular change with like your shooting habits and things leading up to it? Like I know that, you know, for example, some people, if they go over to the US and they're shooting a larger animal like an elk, they might stretch out their meterage to 60 meters. Same as like, you know, if they're spot and stalking African plains game, might be shooting a little bit further. I know where, as hunters, you and I, like I feel like I know the answer. Just with the gear that we use and the way that we hunt, a lot of our shots are within 30 meters. I just wanted to see if that was a factor or played at all. And if any of the boys, such as Benny, had said anything about any potential differences that you might incur.
Not really. To be honest, looking back, I probably underprepared a little bit too much on the actual shooting part. Thinking that like, and we did have, but like millions of opportunities. I was sort of a bit concerned. Like I was really confident 230 and I think I'd practiced 240, but hadn't really like dialed it in. Whereas now I like practice to 60 so that I'm like 100% dialed in at 40, if that makes sense. Like, and it's not that you go and shoot 60 or whatever, but it's just so that you know that you're like, yeah, that really dialed in at that distance. And so I think with that one, like if I had shot further, it would have given me, even in that, you know, 10 extra meters of confidence, a lot more opportunities on like, not that I didn't shoot a, you know, ridiculously good buck and not that I didn't have opportunities on good bucks, but I always just found like, which we'll get, like we'll break down the hunt more, but because you're hunting a lot of animals, you know, there's a lot of eyes on a very open hill face and you're trying to like stalk the one in the middle and, you know, we'll keep going back to this poor analogy of the bait ball. It's like, you're trying to get into that like bait ball when there's, you know, so many animals around just like circling and stuff like that. And so it's quite hard to penetrate. And whereas just, trying to get to that 30 seemed to be a lot harder than like, there was so many times I was at 40 and had like croaking bucks just sitting there for like 10 minutes, but I just like couldn't get that next step. And so I feel like if you're a bow hunter and you're going on this hunt, like having that little bit of extra range would just be, it would just sort of fill you with a bit more confidence. And I mean, like I said, got it done on a very good buck, but it's just, probably was a little bit underdone on this trip in terms of, confidence with range of shooting, which I've rectified now when I do these bigger hunts.
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense. For example, like if I get to 30 on a chittle deer, like it's well within my shooting comfort zone, but I'm also a lot more like confident at 20, whereas 30 on a sambar deer, I'm like, no worries, like this is completely fine. Or 30 on an elk, it's a completely different story. So I can understand that. And then obviously, as you said, one thing, and this is like all in hindsight, going back, like winding back the clock 6 years now as you're hearing this. So this hunt was a long, long time ago. Like every hunt you learn something, every year you learn something as a hunter. So 6 years ago, you were a completely different human, but it is interesting to hear that, you know, you've obviously, learnt from that. And it's one of those things that, you know, if you're hearing this now as a new hunter, a new bow hunter, especially if you are shooting 20 meters thinking, I'm going to go out and shoot that fallow buck, this rut at 20 meters, start shooting at home at 30, 40, 50 if you can, just at least to get like pins set up and things like that. But at least like the error that you have at 50 meters is so like minimal. Like if you're torquing your bow slightly, or your level's not set, or your grip's a bit tight, or you're not following through properly. And this, take it from me, like I'm not a great archer. I'm luckily that I'm a good bow hunter and I'm a good stalker and things like this. I can get in close and sort of seal the deal. But if you are learning, you do want to increase your buffer to be able to, like, you know, hopefully take an animal. It's one of those things that if you're practicing out to 50 meters, it just makes that shot for within 30 meters so much more comfortable. Whereas if you're only shooting 20 meters and then you take a shot at 20, it's like the maximum range that you're shooting. So you're trying to aim for, you know, the top percentage of your capacity, if that makes sense. So I think we probably touched on preparation and things like that in Australia enough. Next, we'll jump over to, arriving in Bulgaria. Cayuga broadheads are engineered for success and built by experience. These are the broadheads we trust for all of our bow hunts. Whether it's buffalo and bangtang bulls in Australia's Northern Territory or chittle deer along the basalt wall, we have ultimate confidence in their range. I'm currently loving the 150 grain Zots. Regardless of your preferred broadhead, quality and performance is guaranteed across the range. If you would like to try them today or shoot them already and want to restock, head to their website and use code TWIN10. That's TWIN 10 numerically at checkout for 10% off your next order. You will not be disappointed. Alrighty, so you arrive in Bulgaria after a couple of days of travel. Let's just discuss the sights and sort of the scenery, being a new destination and a new landscape that you were hunting. What was Sofia like? I understand that's the capital of Bulgaria where you flew into. And then can you just touch on sort of a bit of the travel from Sofia to the hunting grounds?
So I'm pretty bad, and like people, I don't know, probably get up me about this a little bit all the time. Like culture and food and that type of thing, like really interests me. But like in this case, I was very much there to hunt. And so like we pretty much landed at the airport, had the ordeal where Jerry's bow was lost. And so we spent probably an hour trying to deal with that. But our translator who was picking us up from the airport was there ready to go. And so we pretty much loaded up all that gear and we headed straight out to the hunting lodge, which I think from memory was about 3 to 4 hours out. And that was with him driving between like 150 and 180 kilometers an hour. Like it was electric. You and like
Ferrari or?
No, like a Navara. Yeah.
Didn't care about fuel
Oh, it was like
or safety.
oh mate, yeah. It was interesting. Like
you just like glancing over to
and Nick, yeah, like we were sitting in the back and I just remember like you just turn your head and like smile like there's nothing we can do. Like, you know, it's just like, I'm not telling mum about this part, put it that way. Obviously survived it now. And yeah, like it was more just that, like, not that he was zipping through traffic and stuff, but like, yeah, oh yeah, mate. He was keen for that Arvo hunt, put it that way. And, like, yeah, I was in the back behind him. I just remember like peeking over and just being like, shit, like, cause you don't really know. It's like, God, we're going so fast. And then you're like, how fast are we going? You're like, looking, you're like, oh, we're going 160 and you're speeding up. That's great. Like, you know, he only went 180 when he was overtaking. That's fine. But yeah, no, so it pretty much like started off, you know, big highways and stuff like that. And then really dwindled down and you got into like, this is one thing that I'll never forget, but like apparently 10% of Bulgaria still live as like gypsies, like nomadic, like, which is like pretty cool, but it almost reminds us of our histories and backgrounds, obviously Greek. And like, it reminds me a lot of the villages sort of set up, which like obviously Bulgaria is very close to Greece. So I think where we were hunting wasn't that far. It was only like maybe 150 Ks from the Greek border, which was pretty cool. So, but yeah, it reminded me very much of that like village sort of setup where it's sort of, you know, half in ruin, half like someone's got half a carpenter ticket and just, you know, try to fix up a house here and there and patch jobs and stuff. But it was really cool. Like, and, you know, everyone was super friendly and lovely. Like obviously that language barrier was difficult, but yeah, you know, hand gestures and that type of thing. And yeah, we got out to the hunting lodge, which was on a beautiful lake. I'm not sure which one. And yeah, like from there, you know, the sort of experience of the lodge, I guess, and the hospitality really began.
So after spending a few days in camp, you would have obviously got a pretty interesting insight into the hunting culture of the people from Bulgaria. Like, let's sort of speak to that. What is it like in Bulgaria? Are there any unique traditions or practices or anything like that you experienced?
None that were like crazy, you know, out there, I guess. Very much like a very strong hunting culture. Like a lot of it obviously now based off international hunters, but a lot of the people there do hunt and whatnot for game meat. We were hunting like a hunting concession. So they like were leasing that area and there was, so the main person, the main safari we were hunting was Bulgarian hunt safaris or something like that. Which, you know, now it's set up so that if you want to hunt there, if you're in like Australia or New Zealand, you've got to book it through Benny Solaris, which is Silent Pursuit. So he sort of refers them on and does all the logistical organisation stuff. But they had a lease and then he had like a translator and a manager and stuff there. And yeah, it was just interesting to see like how they manage, you know, like I said, they manage the trophy potential really well there with like removing culls and that type of thing. But they do like mouflon hunts, they do red deer hunts, they do wild boar hunts, they do like obviously fallow deer hunts. So there's heaps of opportunities. Wolves, there's heaps of opportunities there, but they're all like, we did see some reds and we did see some wild boar, and obviously saw plenty of fallow, but there's higher densities of each species in a certain area. And they manage it quite closely. Like there was, like if you see a cull and the guide or whatever thinks it's a cull, like you can go and shoot it and like a reduced rate, like it's still going to cost you a little bit, but like, you know, they don't even like, I didn't even see anything that I would call like a cull though. That's the problem. Like I think because their genetics and everything is so pure and so well managed, like I remember it being like this weird thing where it was like you get a spiker, which could be like sometimes as big as a red deer spiker, and then it jumps to like, I don't know, like a 220 Douglas Point buck. Like there was nothing in between. Like if you saw something that was shit, you're like, oh wow, that's like, you know, what the hell's that? But then even like snapped, you know, antlers and stuff. Like I don't know whether that comes back to nutrition or genetics or whatever. Like I think about how many, like my buck actually had a couple of spellers snapped off, which had happened just before I shot him in the days leading up, because Jerry actually nearly shot my buck like 2 days before, and just missed, and he wasn't snapped then. So like it only just, like if I looked probably hard enough on the leg, I reckon I could have found the bit of, you know, the back of his palm, whatever. But yeah, even that, like that was all you found. Like there wasn't many ones that you found that were like broken and stuff. And so definitely for color, like I mentioned, like they really don't like the black does and black bucks. Like if you see any, it's just like, yep, go and shoot it. I think I saw one, but I was hunting like a really big lek, like it might have been 300 plus animals. But yeah, like just the culture is, I don't know, like it's even in the villages and stuff, you feel like hunting and everything, and like sort of that hunter-gatherer or foraging lifestyle is like really important still.
You mentioned a few different species there with like the mouflon, the wolves, like red deer and things like that, the fallow obviously. Am I correct in saying that they're all native to Bulgaria?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then with that, like obviously here we're hunting feral animals here in Australia. Are there any tags? Did you see any tags or quotas or anything like that being laid out, or is that you didn't see?
I should also say, so the wolves are different. Like there are subspecies of like the wolves that you'd expect to see. They were a smaller wolf species.
Probably like a European grey wolf or something.
Yeah, something like that. But it wasn't like, it's not like the ones that you'd expect to see in like Alaska or, you know, like whatever, Canada and stuff.
More like a coyote sort of size and look.
So, but yeah, no, with the tag, so the way that it works was that Bulgarian Hunt Consultant, or whatever the name is, they get an allocation of tags for that consignment or lease area. And then they can go and fill X amount of tags sort of thing.
Do you know how big roughly that area was?
I can't remember. Yeah. It was like, it's sort of interesting, like going into the hunt, but it was sort of interesting in the setup in that, like there were fallow deer everywhere. Like you'd start leaving camp and there'd be fallow deer, but you only hunted the main lek areas, which, you know, for mine, I think maybe and it's hard because we were driving like an old Defender that was like, you know, clapping out at 40 k's an hour sort of thing. And it was pretty rough country, like bush bashing up. But we might drive like half an hour sort of thing to go to a lek. So the area might have been only, it hasn't say like 50,000 acres or 100,000 acres. Like I don't know exactly, but you were only like from the areas that we hunted and like the weeks after us and stuff. You know, there was probably only 6 to 10 leks within that area, and those were the areas that you mainly concentrated on, obviously. Not to say that there's obviously fallow deer scattered in between, but it just seemed that like that's where they really concentrated on. And it was we can go into the hunting part later.
Yeah, we'll dive on all that later. I'm pretty keen to sort of get into just seeing some similarities and differences between here and Australia and whatnot. Were there any language or cultural barriers? Like you said earlier, you had the translators and things like that. You also obviously had a guide, I'm assuming, come with you on these trips. Can you just speak to the relationships there that you were sort of forming and navigating some of these language barriers?
So we had a translator in camp, and he was really good. Like he could, I don't know if he's still there anymore, but like obviously spoke fluent English, better than me in some ways. But he would like help when we were in camp and stuff. And so if you're having, some of the guides were really good. So I had Mehmed, which he could speak like partially Italian, partial Russian, partial English, like obviously full Bulgarian. And so I remember talking to him about his family and stuff and asking about his kids and his wife and where he lived and all that stuff. And so when you asked things like off topic like that, it was a bit harder to like get to sort of work through them, I guess. But like anything hunting wise, like stop here, come, go, eat, blah, blah, blah. Like I remember it it being very much like straightforward, like he was all over it. Whereas some of the other guys was more of like the, shrug your shoulders, point, grunt, like point up the hill, like whatever, like, and they'd gesture with their hands like, oh, that's a big buck or whatever. Like, whereas my guide I was lucky enough to get was very fluent. So it was pretty fortunate, but yeah, it just depends. And that's where a lot of the time with these hunts, like the guides in our case, they weren't really guiding you. Like they'd just take you to the lek. And then because we were all like quite competent hunters, we'd just be like, yep, cool. And like some of them would just like point you to it in the direction of the lek. Some people would like sort of linger half on the hill and half scare the deer 500 meters away or whatever, like, so yeah, it just depended, but they weren't really, it wasn't like, what we would do for our clients, I suppose, as far as, for example, where you're like taking them in there to 30 meters and then being like, yeah, we're all sort of like, hey, you sit back there and we'll just go and do our thing.
Yeah. Like, I often wonder about some of these places, obviously, as you were saying, like you were talking about leaving Sofia, like the capital, which is obviously quite built up, and then driving through, what sounds like a humble lifestyle in the countryside there, and potentially like these gypsy villages and things like that. And as you get further and further out into the bush, it's more of a humble, farm living background and things like that. Was there ever an instance where, like, because I've just seen some films by Yeti, some films by Kuyu, for example, where they go on these extravagant trips to like Mongolia or some sheep hunt or something like that in some foreign place, and they're there with these ultralight Kuyu down jackets and things like that. They've got all this technology, binoculars, bows, and then they're there with these guides who are wearing like sandals in the freezing cold and snow and stuff like that. Was there any like binoculars that instead of being in like, a sort of bino harness, they've got a little bit of paracord strapped around their neck that's just bouncing on their chest, and their binoculars are like those old army ones, like from the Ozcam sort of camo days and things. And it reminds you of like, one, how far hunting in general has gone with the technology and all that type of stuff, but also how good we have it in the sense of like, we're thinking about base layers and this and this and this and like and then an hour to shell, and like we just optimize hunting so far because we were all so addicted nowadays. And then you have like in these films, for example, you look at them and you're wearing these, lower boots up at 10,000 meters elevation, and then you turn around to your guide who's smoking a cigarette on the mountain, walking up the same elevation as you, and he's got like, a pair of sandals and socks on. And you're like, that's a tough man, or I'm either weak. And it's not that you're not tough or anything. It's just that like the difference of how you've grown up. Like, were there any moments like that, or were they pretty like westernized in terms of like their setups, like pretty comfortable?
They weren't westernized, but the fact that the hunting, like they were staying at the lodge with us, like they had quarters and stuff. They were eating like very similar food to us. They, the hunting, like I said, was very similar to like an Australian, New Zealand climate. So it's not like, the elevation wasn't high. So they weren't put into these like crazy, situations that they were accustomed to and we weren't. Like it was very much like you're just hunting here in the Hunter Valley or whatever. Like there was no, even the mountains and stuff, like really, like not really much elevation gain that you're walking and like you're generally just hunting these leks. So like these guys are just driving, and parking 500 meters from a lek and going, okay, let's go. Like they were like, they'd wear like pretty, what we would say bodgy looking camo compared to like probably more of like our hand-me-down stuff that you and I used to make where they'd, sew on leaves or whatever, like what we had when we were growing up. Or that like Ozcam sort of patterns and stuff. Like they certainly weren't wearing like Kuyu and, whatever, that type of stuff. But they, like they just wear basic boots and basic pants and like half of them, some would be wearing jeans or whatever. Like, so that wasn't, but also the hunting pressure, like I also could have been hunting in a pair of Crocs and footy shorts and a camo shirt, like, so it's not like you look at them and you're like, God, these guys are just athletes. Like, just like, they're very good
practical
hunters.
Yeah,
they're very good hunters in their own right, but it wasn't like the environment hadn't forced them to become these like, just athletes. Like you see the guys in like Mongolia and the chauffeurs and like those type of things, like all around the world. And like when you're dying wearing like, a $17,000 pair of backpack and kit and blah, blah, blah. And they're, like you said, like wearing a pair of Birkies and like having a dart and just like walking past you, like what a loser. Bit of a different environment, I guess.
You mentioned food there in one of your comments, and just the fact that you guys ate pretty well and they ate similarly and things like that. Can you just touch on like the accommodation? And like I've seen in the video, you obviously rock up to the lodge, and then there's just this like immense amount of taxidermy and trophies and displays and just, like even photographs and pictures and paintings on the walls and things. What's it like to stay in a place like that? And what was the hospitality like? Like, I know for us, we're not the type of people that, go when we're booking a hunt, oh, what's the, quality of accommodation like? But it certainly helps when you do go on a hunt like this, where your goal is primarily to like experience and chase the rut. You've gone from, Australia, Southern Hemisphere, March, April, hunting the rut, learning lessons, and then going up there to the Northern Hemisphere in October, November, I'm assuming it would have been, having like a double dip at the rut in 1 year. Like, it's pretty phenomenal. But yeah, how much did the accommodation and everything like play on the trip?
Yeah, so it wasn't, like you said, like us, we could have been just as happy as in staying in tents and stuff like that, but having the lodge to go back to, a hot shower and that type of thing is always welcome. The food was really good because it was all local stuff. So like whether it be, pork or fish, like we were staying on a lake and stuff, and so they'd like catch trout and fish out of the lake, and then we'd have that as entree. Like every single meal was like entree, main, dessert, which did get a bit like excessive, I guess. You know what I mean? Like even for someone with a European background that can eat, like the overeating concept, quickly, especially when you're having like dessert at every meal and blah, blah, blah. Also like, yeah, just having, I don't think alcohol was included, or maybe beer, I can't remember, but yeah, like same with soft drinks. Like, they're just like, hey, do you want a Coke? Do you want a Coke? Do you want a Coke? It's like, no, it's fine. But yeah, like even it was nice getting like waited on, but then like they'd get up you because you'd go to take your plate like after a meal to the sink and stuff, and they'd like, they'd almost be insulted sort of thing. So then you just like sit there and let them take it and stuff. But they were super, like, yeah, anything you wanted and stuff. Like even actually it's pretty funny, about 3 days in and stuff, because everyone was, I think, having beers and having stuff. And I said to them, I said, oh, do you have Nesquik in Bulgaria? And they like laughed and they're like, whatever. And I was talking to this was like the main manager guy who could speak English. Anyway, I like took a photo and sent it to him and stuff on WhatsApp. And by the time I'd come back after the Arvo hunt, they had some in camp for me. So like, yeah, it just shows like the level of hospitality that they'll go to. I mean, not a huge thing, but certainly appreciated. And yeah, the accommodation was really nice. Like I think it was set up to be like, it was sort of I can't remember if it was 2 singles or 2 doubles in a room. Like, and that's more for when they've got, like if they've got a heap of people in camp. I think there was only 4 of us at the time. Like I don't think there was actually any other hunters. I think some came as we were leaving and stuff. So we all just had our own rooms, which was really nice. But yeah, like the whole environment and everything in camp, like it was good too, especially when you're filming and stuff. It's nice to it's a hunt where like I know Benny's taken his partner on, but it's a hunt where you could actually take your partner to and stuff and do, because you're also not like, I would hunt most of the day, but like a lot of the boys would just be back. Like just say I was getting light at 6, they'd be back by 9 o'clock, and they'd go out at like 3 in the arvo and hunt till 6. So it's like one of these things that, and you're on like this picturesque lake, like the full autumn, like leaves and everything like that, like beautiful forests and stuff with fallow deer croaking in camp and stuff. So it's one of these ones that you could actually, like, no matter where you are in the world, like you could actually probably bring your partner to. The food's great, he or she would be looked after while you're out hunting. And then you could, come back and, go for a nice fish on the lake or walk on the lake or kayak or whatever. And, bring him or her hunting with you or whatever. So like, yeah, it was a great environment to be in. We all know when it comes to great tasting coffee in the outdoors, look no further than Dog and Gun Coffee. But the same great tasting coffee can also be enjoyed in their whole bean variety in the comfort of your own home. Rounded out with their incredible hog chockey, Dog and Gun has something for everyone. Use code TWIN10 at checkout for $10 off your first order. Discover your brew of choice today.
Definitely a luxury having like good food, drinks and amenities and things like that. I think we probably touched on all the arriving in Bulgaria sort of stuff. What I'd like to now dive into is the hunt. You sort of touched on it there that you were hunting all day. Now, not to ruin a good story for those that haven't actually seen the film, Bowhunting Bulgaria, but you do obviously manage to take, what all of us in any right mind would call like an exceptional fallow buck on this hunt. For those that haven't seen Bowhunting Bulgaria, make sure you go to our YouTube. It'll be in the playlists of like official films. And yeah, James has put together quite a bit of footage and sort of narrates that hunt, and just will give you guys a visual representation of what we're talking about today. It's definitely one of our probably more action-packed, and just visually it's very vibrant. Like some of the colours and things are very different. The bucks are obviously insane, and like the vocalizations and rutting activity, as you'll sort of hear in the next little bit, is pretty remarkable. But I just want to start at like day one. You did touch on a little bit that you wake up at, like 6 or something like that. You start heading out and you got like this half an hour drive out of camp. But how did the hunt sort of unfold on day one? Like for you, was there a particular strategy? Like it sounds like your guide takes you to a major lek, and then I just want you to sort of get into the thought process behind that.
Yeah, so we actually got, with the thanks to the 170 kilometers, 170 to 180 kilometers an hour driving, we actually arrived with like on the first, minus 1 day of hunting sort of thing, and got to hunt the first afternoon, and went to, it seems like each of the guides has their like sort of favorite lek. And so because I had Med, that was the lek that he took me to and stuff. And it was actually the lek that Benny Solaris had shot his big buck on the year before, which was just like a fluke. Like that was the thing. They didn't even know it was there. They'd never seen it before, because like, and even Benny said it, I think in a podcast, because like, well, if they knew that the new record was going to be there, then they would have like, they could have sold that hunt for 5 times more sort of thing. And so it was just like one of these fluke things. And that's the cool thing. Like there is some enormous bucks on these leks. The lek that I was hunting, and probably one of the biggest regrets of the trip a little bit, was that it was like the biggest one out of all of them. Like, and it was nothing to see 200 to 300 animals like on this lek, and it was probably the size of, at the densest core of it was probably the size of like half a rugby field sort of thing. So maybe.
Sorry, you're mentioning lek. I had it in my head that I wanted to get to it a little bit later on, but you're saying this is like a rugby field size sort of lek. What is a lek exactly for those that haven't heard from Australia?
Yeah, so a lek is like a rutting ground, I guess. So it's like, imagine normally here in Australia or New Zealand or whatever like that. So you've got a single scrape on the side of a mountain, and then that's where a doe goes to get bred, and a buck like obviously keeps that area as his like sort of property, I guess. Imagine an area the size of, like I said, like the core area of it being like half the size of a rugby field. So maybe, I don't know, 60 meters by 60 meters sort of thing. And instead of there being like one scrape on it, there's, I don't know, 1,000 or 500. It's, I don't know, like the whole thing is essentially scrapes and just dirt. And on top of that, there might be, I don't know, 50 to 100 bucks. And so each buck is like occupying a scrape. And like the lesser bucks are on the outside, and then the big bucks are like in the middle. And so it's just this rutting fest where there's like, the biggest bucks will hold the center scrapes. The does will like come in from the thick bush. Like all these leks were on like exposed open hill faces, which obviously made the stalking like really hard. And so, yeah, like the main core of my lek would have been like half the size of a footy field. But like if you're going back to that bait ball analogy, it probably would have been the size of like an AFL field, like the whole actual area on top of the ridge. And that just made hunting so hard, because like you're trying to infiltrate and get into this like, 30 meter area of a buck. But you imagine like, well, the center of the core, like the center of the lek is 60 by 60. So you're like well and truly in there. And then that means that like, you're not trying to get seen, you're not trying to get winded, all this stuff, like, and you've got a couple of rocks as your only cover. Like it was a near impossible task. And so that's where I think shooting a little bit further would have helped. Like you pretty much just spend a lot of time on your guts belly crawling, to be honest, like when you're hunting these leks. Later on in the trip, so I think we spent like a couple of days just spot and stalking them. And then later on in the trip, we did start actually building these like rock blinds, I guess, sort of thing, where you'd work out where the center of the lek was. And that's why a lot of the boys, I think, were a bit more successful than me, because their leks were smaller. So it was a lot easier to work out like this is the center of a lek, because their leks might have been like the center of their lek, like the one that I actually shot my buck on was probably the size of a basketball court, for example. So it's a lot easier than like a basketball court or half a basketball court to a half a rugby field. It's very much easier to set up on the side of that. Whereas when your lek's the size of half a footy field / like an actual footy field sort of thing, like I would set up a blind And then for like after the morning when everything's gone back to the thick bush, I'd set up a blind, and by the arvo, the lek would have moved, 50 meters the other way, which means all of a sudden, like, my blind's not in the middle of it anymore. It's, and I'm watching these bucks, like, and that's where you're sort of then trying to just get the bucks, like the big bucks, as they walk at last light into the main lek, but they're walking past you and stuff, and you're trying to get them then.
You sort of touched on the like open terrain and landscape there, and just towards the end of what you were saying, touched as well on like the deep, thick vegetation in the gullies, for example. Do you know like what type of forest they were, or can you give us I know the film gives you a bit of a visual representation of this, but when you say like open ridge lines, it's like not a single tree and just rock and rubble and things like that. Do you think those bucks are out there strategically for that visual display component and like obviously being able to see their rivals, but the does that want to come and breed?
Yeah, I think so. Like, and that's why I think they target the leks, because I even think that the does know that they're there and they like come to those areas to breed. And that's where, like, because you'll see a buck, you just say, it's afternoon, you go and walk onto the lek and you scare off everything that's on the lek and you set up in one of these blinds, and then like you'd see a big buck come back and it might be on like one of the edge scrapes because it doesn't want to be in the middle right near you yet or whatever. And it'd do like 5 croaks, and then like 10 does would run out of the thick bush and come and like, start chirping around him and stuff. So it was awesome to see, like, and that's where it's really affected my hunting and knowledge, I guess, here in Australia, like even around doe calling and that type of thing, which we can touch on later. But it was like really open hill faces. I think it's because like what we've said, like bucks are really chauvinistic and want to, like it's all visual stuff. So does want to see the bucks and assess them and stuff. And they want the bucks to fight so that, the biggest, most mature and fittest one gets the, the prime real estate in the middle, and then they get bred by the does and so on and so forth. And then, as it sort of heated up in the middle of the day, they'd move down into these thick, I don't know what type of trees they were, but they weren't really high. And they weren't, like in some spots they were thicker than others, but it was just that there was so many deer. And to be honest, like, you're obviously on this, which you'd call as like a trophy hunt. And it become really hard unless it was just like an eye opener, like crazy big buck. It became really hard to like judge the bucks when they were in like the thick bush, because you're sort of sitting there and you can't see them that well. And you're sort of like, shit, well, I know you're big, but are you like, how big are you, sort of thing? Whereas like, it's a lot easier when there's like 40 bucks in front of you. You're like, oh, well, that's the biggest one. That's the one you want to shoot, or, that is a nice buck. But like, things looked bigger and smaller when you were like, and especially because I was filming, and especially because I was paying attention to, like little spellers and stuff. Like there was ones that would have like, like a forked speller coming off, or a forked brow tine, or a forked guard tine, or something like that, or whatever. And like these little characteristics, or the shape of their palms and stuff. And then you'd actually get in fairly close and get some footage and stuff. You're like, oh, I just don't think he's quite big enough. And then you like see him on the lek that night, and you were like 50 meters away filming, and then you're like, actually, shit, that was like a really big buck. I probably should have shot him. You know what I mean? So it was sort of hard once they got into the thick bush, especially even if you were following, like you just say you've tried a couple of days, I tried to follow big bucks back into the thick stuff to like, get in on them there. But, like they'll walk through 5 other bucks and that are croaking and a couple of does and stuff. And and then it's like, it's thick enough that you just lose them, and it's so hard to like find them again.
Do you think like hunting pressure had a big influence on these like animals? Like, did you notice that over like day one, they were very like, visual, come up to their scrapes as per normal, or their lek, sorry. And then day 2, it like you had a few less deer and they're a bit more cautious. And then by day 3 or 4, it was just like you'd change their patterns? Or was it simply like what it sounds like you're alluding to, like there was that level of like hesitancy, like that obviously seeing you go and set up on the scrape or create a blind, or they're looking at this new rock formation in the middle of their like lek. But as soon as like one buck starts croaking and just the pure mass of like animals and bucks and things like that, like as soon as that one breaks the ice, then you get 2 or 3 joining in the chorus and croaking, and then a few does start coming around, like just the insane level of fighting and croaking and things like that. Like they sort of go back to being fallow deer. Do you think there's like that benefit of population dynamics where the hunting pressure didn't potentially have as much significance as it does like here in Australia, for example?
Yes and no. So I think talking on the first week of hunters, it was meant to be Benny Solaris, who he ended up not being able to go for work reasons or family reasons or something like that. So it ended up being Casey McCullum, Robbie Austin, and then Robbie's mate Dill, who I'm not sure of his last name, but all very good hunters and hunted a lot of fallow here in Australia. And then it was me, Brad Murphy, Nick, and Jerry in the second week, and talking to them between first and second week, and then even what we noticed in the second week. On the first week, the does weren't really so they were early October, and then we were, I think, the second week in October. And they all shot brilliant bucks, but I think they were saying the does weren't rocking up and hadn't really started getting bred yet. And this is going back to our fallow deer talk that we did. And that's where deciphering that peak rut period, because all the bucks were sitting on the scrapes, on the leks, croaking their guts out. But the does hadn't really started rocking up yet and hadn't really started getting bred. And so all the bucks were really fresh in terms of the boys set up blinds and stuff too on some of these smaller leks, and they reckon that they'd just shift their head a tiny bit and a buck would just see them. And, whereas with us, because they'd been rutting just say for 10 days straight by then, it was nothing in the arvo to rock up on a lek and you'd find 5 bucks half comatose sleeping on the lek because they were just absolutely rat shit because they've been croaking and running and fighting and stuff 10 days, not eating, barely drinking, And so we certainly saw a transition period in buck behavior, but I don't think hunter pressure really affected it too much. I think on the big lek that I was hunting, it probably did, because I was trying to with a lot of the guys, they just set up blinds pretty early on these leks and just waited for good bucks to come in, which was a really smart tool in this case, especially with being bow hunters and having a lot of animals, limited shooting range and stuff like that. I was probably a bit more stubborn and persistent as usual, where I was trying to just spot and stalk and stuff. And I think because of that, I was scaring a lot of them and putting a bit more pressure on them than a lot of the other guys. And I think it did change their sort of behaviors a bit, where they were coming out later and as soon as, I said, we'd park 500 meters or whatever, and I think you'd be halfway up the ridge and stuff would already be moving off or whatever because they heard the car and things like that. But for the most part, I think it was just natural progression in terms of the rut, and something that we'd see probably similar here in Australia with bucks just getting absolutely flogged out during the rut, and then just sort of winding back their activity a little bit compared to those first couple of days when they're really fresh.
Are you in the market for serious boots for all feet, terrain and adventures? Well, look no further than Lower Boots. We have been running the Lower Ranger GTX3s for many, many years now without so much as a blister. The team at Lower have extended their generosity to you, our valued listeners, and supplied us with a unique discount code. Use code TWINELEMENTS10 at checkout for 10% off your next order. Wear Lowers on your next hunt. Your feet will thank you. Going back to the film in particular, you have this scene quite early on where I think it was Jerry obviously had lost his bow in transit and things like that. So I'm assuming it's either day one or that afternoon, 0 sort of thing. And then day one, you go through this encounter where you do actually do it a spot and stalk on a buck. And then it sort of, I won't spoil it for those that haven't seen it, but it doesn't go quite to plan. What's the biggest learning curve there? Because obviously you rock up to a place like this, it's afternoon 0, you've done all this travel, it's sort of you're getting out there for, a hunt. Can you just allude to, you can run down with what happens, it's not too much of a spoiler, they'll see it when they watch Bowhunting Bulgaria, but just, obviously the lessons from that, please.
Yeah, I think just no matter where you go, if you travel, even, it sounds a bit silly, I'm a bit slack here on local hunts and stuff, if I'm only driving 15, 20 minutes, half an hour or whatever. But if I'm going anywhere in a plane, or if I'm going anywhere, far, the first thing I do now because of this trip is shoot my bow. And so, sorry to the people that haven't seen it, but I end up stalking in on a really good buck. I can't remember exactly how far I was off him. I think I want to say 25 to 30 maybe. So not, crazy far. A lot of I think the comments in the YouTube and stuff, not that I have really looked, but I'm pretty sure a lot of people, I should just say the shot angle that Jerry had was a lot different. I could see a lot more of the buck in terms of was pretty confident where I was going to pin him and stuff. But I ended up shooting over his back, perfect line, just really high, and then went back and shot my bow, and I was shooting 8 to 10 inches high from where I was aiming. And so I retuned my bow in for that. And it just like, so now, whether it be New Zealand, Europe, US, whatever, like anywhere, like even flying up to towns where I hunt chital or anywhere, like anywhere, especially the plane, I'll always have some shots of my bow, like even if it's like 20 meters under a car light the night before I go out, because there's nothing worse. And in this case, like I could have shot that buck and just been absolutely stoked and then like filmed Jerry for the week or whatever, like it, not to say that it didn't take away from the trip or whatever. In fact, it probably added to the trip. But yeah, I mean, like imagine if I'd wounded it though, like that's more of the problem with this. And it's just making sure that your gear's right, because, you'd hate to be on a hunt and only have one opportunity and wound an animal and lose it. And then that's it on the first day just because you didn't shoot your bow. And so now, like, whether it's under car light or whether it's like before I go for a hunt, I'll always just put a couple of shots down range just to make sure that your bow's in, and this is the only time it's ever happened, like ever. But I mean, it cost me a very nice fallow buck. So
yeah, I think just speaking about it and like obviously raising awareness about it, I think hunting has changed quite a lot in the last 5 years with social media, because people are so like forefront about the mistakes they've made, and then hopefully like steep learning curves that people would otherwise make by themselves, like in the dark, people are learning from, which is one of the good and bad things about social media. But you can obviously watch that and see for yourselves, but it's just one of those things that we urge everyone, like obviously it's just such a different mindset to go and put, even like I remember on this elk trip that James and I just did in 2023 where we hunted for like a month, we would get back to camp and we'd actually purchase like $180 target just for the sake of being able to shoot, every night back at camp under torchlight, because it just meant that James, in the back of his mind when he was going out that next morning, was like, yep, I know that when my opportunity finally does come, and it came after 20 odd days, I'm going to be able to shoot this elk where I need the arrow to go. And it's, I'm going to, because it's so like tough going on an international hunt particularly, but as James alluded to, any hunt, and just seeing like the heartbreak of either missing, which is not even the worst thing. The worst thing is like wounding or maiming an animal that is so spectacular simply because of like a gear malfunction. And like bow hunting in particular is hard enough where things go wrong, animals move, there's deflections, all these things that you can't necessarily account for. But when it's something that you have to take onus for, and your sight's out by 10 inches in this case, it's so preventable. So that's just like a massive learning curve for hopefully our listeners, and then obviously the people that have viewed that YouTube video. You've sort of alluded to a little bit what like the most challenging aspects of bow hunting these deer were, and it seems like it was obviously just like the harsh terrain in terms of being quite open and exposed and like very rocky. With these blinds that you talk about, I can kind of picture you going there and creating like a little fortress sort of out of rock. And you see in some of the videos, like someone's videoing you from up and above and you're like sitting in this little half wall thing. How long, like talk about the construction of these things and how long it took, and like, did you notice that it did kind of like give you a second glance and go, because I noticed in one of the blinds that you're sitting at, I'm assuming it's what you're talking about, it was just like a half wall, which almost gives you like an avenue to maybe draw, like not even particularly, if something comes in from behind you, they're going to obviously see you, but it was just, it's interesting to see like what you termed a blind and like how long that took to build.
Oh, it'd probably take you, like, because the rocks were, like, you'd sort of try and find the bigger rocks that were maybe a basketball size bigger. It didn't take that long. It might have taken 15, 20 minutes or whatever. But the thing was really, it was just to like give you a bit of a backdrop and break up your outline. And that's the thing. Like, so you would have a deer walking past all the time and just like sitting there, like frozen, like not turn your head, just like moving your eyes and stuff. In one of the films, you actually see me like huddled behind, and I'm outside, or like I'd actually made like a full 360 one in the center of it. And then that was probably day 3 or 4. I can't remember if it was a 4 or 5 day hunt, but it was like getting on in the hunt. And it was the arvo before I shot my actual buck. And I remember I'd like got out because the thermals that like I was sitting above them all, and like normally the wind always sucked a certain way across this, and for that day it didn't. And so like I actually busted all the animals off. And I remember I'd like got out like with only half an hour of light to go and stalk a buck, and it like that didn't happen. But then when I was walking back up to the original blind I was sitting in, another buck that I really wanted to shoot had like walked past the blind at like 20 meters, and I was just like, this is bullshit.
Yeah, I think it's like one of those tactics or strategies that it seems like, once you kind of went, okay, the way I'm going to shoot a buck is from this blind, like you've really got to just stick to it. Because again, you think like, oh, now's my chance as a buck by himself. But there's just so many like factors that you can sort of forget about. And like with that many animals and eyes and stuff, you only need one doe to like bark from 100 meters away, or one buck to run off across the hill like that you're not even paying attention to, just because there's such a surplus of animals. And then that target animal move off, and then you look back, and just in that, it always seems like, Murphy's Law, that second you leave your bow at the car or whatever, we spoke about this, about checking cameras or checking a dam for a wallow or something, and don't take your bow, there's always like an animal there. And it's the same as the second you leave that tree stand, or you leave that blind, or you don't sit on that scrape and you look at it, there's a buck sitting on it. So I think, you've obviously like established where the lek is, you built the blinds, like, and I know that going into your actual sort of buck hunt, where you do end up taking a buck, like you were sitting in a blind.
I think it just, with the blind hunting, like, with a bow, you sort of were left with no options. Like we genuinely tried everything. So like I said, like we tried, I tried. So we tried hunting them just pure spot and stalk on the lek, especially like I probably could have been more successful, like I said, if I was on a smaller lek. But the one that I was on, like I said, like a football size one on top of an open hilltop with like 10 rocks the size of a kitchen table scattered across it. And then you've got like 200 to 300 eyes or 200 to 300 deer. It's like, good luck, mate, like with a bow. We tried following, like I tried scaring bucks, like scaring the whole lek off of me. Like I'll just follow it up into the thick stuff, like putting them in the situation that I could then follow them up. But then you've still got too many deer and you're like flat out trying to find them again. I tried like sitting off ages off them and watching them, because a lot of the bucks would actually move off. So there was one morning I remember just being like, hey, we're going to sleep in this morning, and we're going to, instead of it being there at 6 a.m., we're going to be there at 8 o'clock. And I just hope that one of the bucks I want to shoot has decided to stay on the lek, but there's going to be a shitload less deer on there or whatever. And I remember getting up above it. And yeah, I can't remember if there was a buck or not, but yeah, like that strategy didn't work either. We tried rattling, we tried doe calling, we tried, croaking, we tried everything. Like, and they, like when you do all that stuff, they just didn't respond. Because imagine being at like a music festival with like 1,000 screaming people, and you just sit there and go like, you start screaming as well. And like, even if you're like, oh, there's an emergency, like they're just like, oh, cool, bro. Like, yeah, this is a sick song. Like, and they just keep like, and that's the thing, like you croak, rattle, doe call and stuff. They're like, yeah, there's 1,000 other does here in front of me. I don't care. Like, so yeah, it was sort of just like an overstimulation of stuff. So they just like didn't really respond to anything. And so it just got to the point that it was like, if you had a bow, if I'd capitalized on that first opportunity, probably would have been different. And that was just lucky that we'd found that buck, where we did and when we did. But yeah, for me, like I tried on that bigger one, and the boys were saying from early on, because they were like, I think Brad ended up shooting 2 bucks. Nick had a really big one in mind that he got, and Jerry, like I said, I think he missed my buck and then got another really good one off the scrape that he was hunting. But like all their scrapes were significantly smaller. Like they were only, I don't know, like I said, maybe the size of like half a basketball court, but with the wider area being the size of like a half rugby field sort of thing, like of that sort of bait ball interaction sort of thing. And so, yeah, like that was the last arvo, and it's like, well, I really want to shoot a buck. So I moved to one of theirs.
You obviously just mentioned then that like it's the last afternoon of, what was it, a 4 or 5 day hunt? Yeah. So you've been there for a while. You've obviously had the dream of going on this international hunt and taking a buck. Like, let's make no mistake about it. You're going there to shoot a buck, like not necessarily go trout fishing and sightseeing sort of thing. As you're going on in this hunt and you've missed the opportunity on a fallow buck early in the trip, like you've shot over one's back, you probably, it's impossible as a hunter not to sort of be dwelling on that a little bit. Was there a big shift in like your mindset in terms of like trophy, like what you would be happy with shooting? Just because like as guides ourselves and doing like spotted safaris, I can't tell you the amount of, bow hunters in particular that have come on a hunt and said, nah, I don't want to shoot anything but a 30-inch chital deer, which, is definitely doable, but it's like the top 1% of animals in terms of maturity and age and trophy potential, nutrition, genetics. There's so much that goes into an animal like that. And then it's interesting that on, morning one of the actual trip, after having all these conversations with people over the phone as to what their expectations are, like a 23-inch chital deer, which is a beautiful animal, walks past and like, yeah, can I shoot it? And you're like, woo up, like, let's just, you said that you want to shoot a 30-incher, which may or may not happen, but like, let's at least shoot a mature deer. Do you know what I mean? Like, so there's obviously, as hunters, like massive shifts in mindset and just expectations. And I guess something that we've always spoke about on these bigger trips as we've done more of them is like, if you're happy to shoot something on the last day, shoot it on the first day sort of thing in terms of trophy potential and maturity. Like a mature animal is a mature animal. And we've obviously got better with that as we've hunted more. It makes it hard when you're obviously doing like a limited entry elk hunt and you're like, this is the once in a lifetime opportunity that I'll have. But can you just, I guess touch on that? Like, was there a shift? If so at all, like, I'm not sure. This is a genuine question in terms of like, did you go into that last afternoon of the trip being like, I'm going to shoot the first buck? Or was it always just like, I think I'll be able to get a buck simply because there's so many, like hold out a little bit?
I'm probably like, it was the same with the US trip. Like and maybe a little bit of buff trip, but like, I'm just a pain in the ass when it comes to these like trophy hunts. Like I'm genuinely very content shooting like just what I would say like a mature animal on most hunts. You know what I mean? Like I always certainly like pushing the bar. Like if I've shot X size animal or whatever, like I like to find one bigger than that. And that's just for, pushing myself further, and I enjoy that process. But for me, for some reason, as soon as a price tag or something like that comes on an animal, or it's like a once in a lifetime hunt, whatever, like the elk hunt, for example, like I just become a bastard. Like I do, like, and I know that. Because I want to shoot the biggest one, you know what I mean? And I know that myself. And you obviously see that with the elk a little bit hunt where I'm, got incredible opportunities at elk bigger than I'll probably shoot in the next 10 years. And I'm like, oh no, and I sort of like not pass them up because that's not the right way of saying it, but didn't really commit to a stalk. Like, cause I'm like, oh, I don't think they're that big. And it was with this Bulgaria hunt, I think just because I had so many opportunities, there was, not really any doubt in my mind, and that's sort of the blessing of the hunt that I was like and it's a dumb thought to have. Like I'm going to say this now. There was no doubt in my mind at the time that I was going to get like a buck at least, or a good, like a semi good buck, which is dumb because like very much easily could have left there without getting one. But yeah, like so I didn't really like. I was just like, I'll go and sit on these leks, and that's the thing. Like when you sit on a lek and you've got a good blind and you're in one of these smaller leks, like. You don't have the number of deer. Like you might only have, maybe $20 instead of $80 sort of thing. And you might only have like 60 does instead of, another 200 does. But the thing is like one out of those $30 is going to be like a cracker still. Know where you stand with Onyx, the most accurate GPS mapping tech for outdoor enthusiasts, trusted by millions of hunters worldwide. We utilize Onyx whilst hunting in the US. Its mapping systems, specialist drop pins, tracking features, topographical maps, and accuracy is unmatched. Being able to plan and prepare for our hunts overseas in the comfort of our own home is a game changer. If you're looking at hunting in the US, Canada, or Alaska, then Onyx is a must. Do you want to go into like the full Arvo hunt breakdown of that last hunt, or? Yeah,
I just like definitely wanted to assess like your mindset going into that last hunt, like that last hour or so of the hunt. And then, like now, can you, dive in, let us know how that hunt unfolded?
Yeah, I'll jump in because what happened was, so Jerry was actually there, the Arvo that I shot mine. It was his lek that I'd been hunting. And like I said, he actually shot under the brisket of the buck that I actually end up shooting. And he, like, because Jerry had already sort of, because you're there, like you see the same bucks and stuff. And he was just like an absolute brute of a buck. Like you see in the video, he like pretty much walks up to the lek and just like comes in and just bashes like this other buck that was like in the middle of it and stuff. But I just set up, had the camera sitting there. It was really good. Like had all these beautiful bucks around me, had probably like 10 bucks. And then there was actually a bigger buck, which was probably the biggest buck I saw for the whole trip, interestingly enough, down in the gully. And not far. Like if I had a rifle, we could have shown many, like 160 meters away, like down in the bottom. And I was waiting for him to come up to the lek. And interestingly enough, and this is where like, it's just dumb thinking that anything in hunting is guaranteed, because I'm like, oh yeah, I'll still get a big buck and blah, blah, blah. But Jerry actually was hunting the bottom of the valley. And so he started coming up And part of the reason I was waiting for that big like monster buck to come up, and had my buck that ended up shooting in front of me for like 15 minutes fighting other bucks and and like knew I wanted, like would have been happy shooting him. But this is like, you know, now we're on James's law for being an absolute idiot. Was willing to risk it to see if this other big buck would like come in so I could shoot him. And it wasn't until I think Jerry was down in the bottom of the valley and scared some does and stuff, and I saw some like deer like run and move down there, and I knew it was down there, and I was like, and I had probably like, I don't know, 45 minutes of light left or whatever on my last hunt, like after paying all this money, and I was like, nah, stuff this. And that's why I like just 10 ringed that buck, which the same thing, like was over the moon with, like, you know, and it's one of these hunts that's sort of like the US hunt where it's like you're going there for that whole experience. Like it's not just like the trophy at the end of the day is the thing that took you there, but it's like like it's even the guides and the culture and the food and the lodging, and like it's that whole immersive experience that is what we love and so passionate about. And so, yeah, to get the trophy at the end of it as well, you know, that I look back on fondly, is obviously a huge reward. But it's like, yeah, that whole week of hunting was awesome.
Some of my favourite scenes from your actual film were probably in that last like 15 minutes or 20 minutes of the hunt, leading up to when you take your buck. And like, as you said, like I can just picture it again. I wasn't there, so it's hearing you talk about it is quite interesting. But for those that will go and watch the video, Bowhunting Bulgaria on our YouTube, there's this scene where like the buck is sort of there and it looks like he's right there at 15, 20 meters or something like that. And he's like got this broken spallers on one antler, and like the way that his antlers come in is just like, he's not like the biggest deer in terms of, it's like, I'm trying to give not like justice to him, but like there's that scene that you're talking about where you see this buck down the bottom of the valley, and he's just like, holy crap, that's like massive and pretty and stuff. And then there's this buck that you end up shooting, which is just like the way his antlers come in and over the top. It's almost like overhanging trees, and the way that he's like the palms of his antlers. It's, to be honest, like what I look for when I'm looking at it, like an Australian mature fallow deer buck is like, they can have a great palm, but that could be like a 4-year-old buck. Whereas as soon as that palm starts reaching in, if you're looking at like their right or left antlers, and they hook in over the front and start angling back towards like the middle and carry a bit of weight in that's when you kind of go, oh, that's actually like a mature deer. And then obviously things like spallers and palms and all that is like very much like a genetic thing. And these bucks are all got great genetics, assumably. But it was just like, I actually liked the fact that he had that bit of a broken antler, and then you see him in the footage like just go to war with this other buck. They're like fighting each other. And then one of my highlights is when that third buck just runs in and sort of takes the opportunity to, as we discussed in the Fallow Rut Tactics podcast, like when bucks are fighting, it's not like, and it's peak rut, they're not like, all right, 1, 2, 3, like gentleman's agreement, let's go. It's like if they can get any 1% like upper hand, they're going to take it. And like this third buck just comes in and tries to jam, you know, these two bucks that are pretty much locked in fighting together in the back of the ribs, and just seeing that, and then the way that they quite elegantly can actually navigate that rocky terrain, and like you got boulders flicking up, like they're fighting, and dust and rubble and rock is like sort of, it's like a magical like experience, and it is so different to what we've got on offer here in Australia, which is pretty cool. Have you got any other like highlights from the trip that we haven't touched on? Like there's obviously, we started at day 1 or so, I'm assuming, when you miss that buck, and then day 4 or 5 when you do shoot a buck. Like there's so much hunting in the middle of that. Like is there another encounter or encounters that you just want to touch on briefly?
I think just the whole thing of like rutting and stuff, like actually spending, and I really enjoyed that last afternoon of hunting, because I sort of, I don't know, like even that buck, like I knew I like would have happily shot him and did happily shoot him and stuff, but I was trying to shoot the other one, so there was sort of no pressure in it, if that makes sense. Like, and it was just really nice to just sit there and watch them fight and watch them croak at like 15 to, like one of the bucks was like 8 meters from me croaking his head off, you know.
I guess we haven't really spoken about it, and maybe like not necessarily as a highlight, because it sounds like the whole experience was just insane, but how much harder was it going into this trip wanting to record it and film it? Because like obviously you're talking about being very visual and exposed potentially in these blinds and stuff, and you've got bucks everywhere around you, and then potentially up to 200 does, 80 if it's a good sort of situation. how hard is it to obviously come to full draw and they're trying to move a camera and like position on these bucks and things like that? Like you've got the benefit of the rut going on a little bit longer and they're getting a bit more tired, a bit more fired up and stuff. But was there ever a moment where you were like, I'm going to have to ditch the camera and just get it done? Or again, you were just sort of enjoying the moment for what it was and just trying to capture both the essence of the bow hunt itself and trying to get it on film?
Yeah, when I was actually hunting like from the blinds and stuff, it was never a problem because you could, and that's where like a lot of the footage you see. When you were out like spot and stalking and that type of thing, like I wasn't as committed. Like I still had the camera with me all the time and stuff, but it was just sort of opportunity permitted and stuff. Like if you've got a buck, I don't know, like if you're sitting there crawling in and then you've got bucks like 30 meters away croaking and does like 10 meters away, and like the spike is for genuinely the worst because they were all on the periphery and stuff. But it just depended on the environment. Like certainly would have shot a buck off film if that's what it came to, but definitely like went there with the priority of trying to get it done. And I mean, like that's another reason why I did actually really enjoy the blind, because I could then set up everything properly and have it all, like I pretty much shot like 4 inches past my camera when I actually shot the buck. So yeah, like it gave that opportunity to be able to capture on film, which I'll, value forever. Being able to film it, the whole process, and, get all those wildlife snippets or wild rutting activities. So it was an awesome week.
So you shoot the buck, he obviously goes down the hill and falls over and expires and everything like that. What then happens? Like, do you get a moment to yourself to sort of think about the hunt? Does your guide come over? Like, can you talk about just the trophy care and processing and like I understand their way of getting that animal out of the mountains is potentially a bit different to ours. Like we've certainly carried animals out whole, but this, from what you've said, like takes it all to another level.
So it was so funny actually, because obviously like shot the buck, only just like ran down the hill and died. Jerry came up out of the valley and was like, "Oh, sick man," you're like, fist pump, stoked, all that type of stuff. And wanted to do like a film the after shot sequence sort of thing, like what we're doing at the time, and take some photos and blah blah blah. And the guide had messaged the camp that I'd shot a buck, and so like, it's hard to describe. I'll never forget the thing, but like it was probably 200 meters off the top of the ridge, and so these like old guys who were the like skinners and butchers and stuff, like I don't know, like just people like emerging out of the rocks sort of thing. Like imagine your grandpa trying to like slowly walk down this like rocky steep hill, and then there's like a couple of younger fit guys who were the I guess the muscle really. And so I'm trying to take photos, and like in the background you can just see these like just people in normal clothing like coming down the hill, and I had to be like, "Can you guys please like move, the light's fading and like I want to get some good photos of this buck," and blah blah blah. And anyway, so they came down, and like same thing, we're just like, well, we'd already decided that getting capes, like they were bigger deer, but it's like you could shoot a fallow the same size in Australia and just get a cape off one of them. So we also decided that we just do that for like managing weight and getting trophies back and stuff. So really it was just the head, but yeah, they pretty much went straight to work. So we were just like, they're like, we want to take the meat. It's like, yeah, that's cool. And I was like, do you want me to like gut it and blah, blah, blah. And no. They're like almost offended that I'd asked once again. And so like the older dude who was like the chief butcher, I guess. So he like pretty quickly like had it gutted and sort of quartered out, but not quartered out like when they do South American like cooking styles, and they'd like pitched it up onto this like crucifix sort of thing. And so they carried my buck out like just gutted on like a crucifix with these like blokes that were helping and stuff. And anyway, they just like, walked back. I wish I got it on film. I didn't. Like,
almost like a butterflied lamb on the spit sort of thing, or a goat. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
And then they walked back up the hill, and got back to camp. And then they like fully butchered it there, which like we obviously didn't eat it, but we were eating venison and stuff so we would have been eating stuff from that like Dylan, Robbie, and Casey shot and stuff, which they cooked beautifully in different ways. But yeah, so then they like eat all the venison and share it amongst the villagers and stuff. The hide, I don't know what they did with, and then the antlers went out the next day, and just because we had like a half rest day sort of thing, and old mate's just like sitting there boiling my skull, having a durry. Pretty cool experience. He didn't speak any English, but we bonded.
Embark on an unforgettable journey with our fully guided Cheddaree hunts, catering to both rifle and bow hunters. Spotted Safaris is conducted in the heart of the Basalt Wall region, North Queensland, Australia. We specialise in catering to all experience and fitness levels of our clients, providing trophy stag chital hunts as well as beginner focus adventures and meat hunts. With over 15 years bow hunting chital deer, our guides know these animals and the grounds they hunt like the back of their hands. With chances at a mature basalt boar as a bycatch and some spectacular wildlife viewing, there really is something for everyone at Spotted Safaris. Inquire today by emailing spottedsafaris@hotmail.com or simply send them a DM on their socials. In terms of like trophy quality, the caliber of bucks are obviously ridiculous. And as I understand it today in 2025, like one of the world records for, fallow bucks is in Bulgaria currently. Just for those of you that are listening, like here in Australia, we obviously use like a Douglas score or an SCI or something like that, where we're often measuring, antler point, lengths, all these types of things. Like over in Europe, they use like what's called the CIC or International Council for Game and Wildlife Conservation scoring system quite a lot, where weight of the antlers and skull is actually one of the most important factors in determining like the final score of a fallow deer trophy over there. So I guess we'll try and give you guys just a little bit of a background, because this is obviously like quite a new concept, but I rather like it in terms of, because in most of the older deer that I've personally shot, or the older, more mature animals, like you can't, age and weight just seems to be like tightly correlated. Like you can shoot a really nice 4-year-old fallow buck or a really nice 5-year-old chital stag, and he's he could be 30 inches long for the chital deer. But his antlers might be really long and spindly. Whereas if you shoot that like 27-inch chital stag that's 8 or 9, his antlers might be twice as heavy. And some deer like will have different mass attributed with their genetics, but it's just one of those things that as they get older, that mass and weight sort of seems to accumulate. So generally, like how they weigh them, you spoke about boiling and stuff like that. From what I've read, the antlers, like obviously and the skulls are boiled, cleaned and dried, and then they remove like the lower jaw. Is that correct?
Yeah, so you just get the top of the skull back.
So understanding this and then being able to like look at your buck and a lot of the bucks that the gentleman obviously shot over like the 2-week period of these Australian hunters going over there. Can you just talk to the like variation in weight? Like how much did that differ? Because there are photos of like, for me, I think Robbie Austin, I know, shot a huge buck visually that looked really awesome. Like had, as we described, like as most people look, they go, holy crap, that's got huge palms and stuff like that. And then like, I know I looked at yours and was like, oh, did you shoot like a smaller one, like, or younger? And then you go, no, mine actually had like ridiculous mass to it. And I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. And then you sort of like watch the footage back, and again, you see these characteristics of like the broken antler and stuff, and like the palms coming right in and creeping around, and then just like they almost looked shortened and stunted because I think it was so heavy, which is pretty cool. And again, that's why fallow deer are just like a remarkable species in general, because yeah, they all have palms, but whether they have broken points off the back or perfectly, 4 or 5 inch spellers, whether their palms are smaller or weaker or have clefts or whatnot, like there's so many different like attributes that make them have different characteristics and different sort of visual appeals. But yeah, can you just speak to, I guess, the weight of their antlers and different sort of measurement systems?
Yeah, that's how. I'm not going to dive into the costs, like, because like being 6 years down the road now, we've gone through COVID and inflation and all the rest of it. So like, I don't want to, tell pricing. Like, if talk to Benny Solaris at Silent Pursuits if you want to get pricing, which I would encourage you to do. It was an awesome hunt. But so at the time, like my buck actually weighed 3.46 kilos and was aged at 8 years old, which was pretty cool. They do all that off teeth and everything like that. So you get like a full breakdown from the Republic of Bulgaria, Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Forests. And it is like, the evaluation of your hunting trophy, which emphasizes that sort of culture they've got over there. But it goes into like all your tine lengths and everything like that. The weight measurements and stuff, like in terms of like circumference of antlers and stuff. So you get all those type of things. And then the big one that they all do over there, which I think would be a great system for, even like elk and reds and like even here, like that water displacement or weight or something like that, where it's a better representation of, a true, like an animal, rather than just Douglas point scoring and stuff, or getting penalized for something not having like a matching brow or whatever. But yeah, so mine weighed 3.46 kilos. And from memory, Robbie's, which was, like Ayden said, like not taking away from my buck, he was like an absolute brute, like something I still to this day am extremely happy with shooting. But Robbie's was like a, once in a lifetime sort of deer sort of thing for over there. Like it was a really good buck. And ours actually weighed similarly. So we paid like similar pricing, because that's how like the pricing over there, you pay like a to go on the hunt fee, which is like the lodging fee and like all that type of stuff. And then your trophy fee comes out of like the weight of the animal. So a few of the boys, like Jerry and Brad and stuff like that, like they paid significantly less for their trophies, which arguably were probably similar size or maybe slightly bigger in some cases, maybe slightly smaller. I can't exactly remember, but like we're all pretty similar in bucks. But mine might have been like 1.5 to 2 times the price, just purely because it was so heavy, because it's a sliding scale. So like at the first end, it might be that 2.5 kilos costs so much. For every 250 grams, it just gets so much more expensive. And so with my buck, they also like assess the color of the actual animal, mass and formation. Like if they're missing, like you get penalty points in this system too for if they're there's not enough span of the like gap, which mine sort of got crucified for as well. Not that I care at all about this sheet. It's just cool that you get it back, you know what I mean? And so overall they scored it, I guess, a silver medal, which was, I didn't get a medal, but I got a laminated sheet of paper, which I definitely keep, and it's cool to have. But yeah, he was like an awesome buck, and like something that like I said, I look back on really fondly, just because it highlights more than just that trophy. Like it highlights the couple of, like, the week of hunting, whatever, and the journey getting there, and the culture. But also like genuinely that 2 hours that I spent on that lek just hunting and filming, like I don't think the camera stopped filming that whole time. Like I pretty much rocked up. There was a couple of bucks asleep on the lek, snuck in quietly to this spot, got the camera set up and sort of half woke them up. And then that just like triggered them. And then all of a sudden these just bucks started fighting, rocking up, croaking everywhere. And it was just, it was an awesome afternoon that I'll never forget.
No, it sounds amazing. For those interested, I've just done a bit of research leading into this podcast, and it looks like the world record trophy in Bulgaria was taken in 1988, which I'm assuming is a rifle shot animal, which weighed 5.9 kilograms, so just like immense. And then obviously that seemed to have scored over 230 CIC points, which was that European measurement system that we spoke about earlier, with some recent top trophies in the late 2020s, obviously recently being around that 5.5 kilogram mark, which are just like their moose of fallow deer. And that's where Benny Solaris's archery shot Bulgarian fallow would probably be somewhere in that ballpark, which is just, a testament to how good some of that bow hunting in Bulgaria is. Moving on now, like you've obviously done the hunt, looking back on it quite fondly. I just want to touch on like some reflection and potentially some advice to people that are listening to this if they do want to, break down the barriers to getting over there. What are like the main lessons that you learned from bow hunting fallow deer in Bulgaria? Like, and can you bring, like often with these hunts, like whether it's an elk hunt in the US, you try and bring back tips and tactics as to how to either become a better mountains hunter, assess the wind better, make better decisions, work on your fitness, take biology and habits from the elk and bring it back to red deer, for example, here. Like in this instance, it's Northern Hemisphere fallow deer, taking it back to Southern Hemisphere. We've done the podcast recently where we talk a lot and in depth on fallow deer biology and stuff like that. Was this like a really big eye-opener into just like fallow deer behavior? I feel like it would have been a bit of a clinic, just being able to watch 200 deer do certain things. Like,
I think the biggest takeaway that I took from it was around fallow does and doe calling and stuff like that, because it's so interesting. Like when people over here, and I see the fight all the time on social media when someone will comment on someone's post or whatever and be like, oh, that's not how you doe call. And I just like laugh at them, because I'm like, as many different dialects and voices as we have, like it sounds silly, but like when we were sitting on that hill and you've got like 200 fallow does chirping around you, like, because people will go, oh, you've got to go ming or me or like, whatever, like different things. And like, I don't know, you sit there and like even, yeah, like it was just ridiculous. Like it was just the different sounds and stuff. So like for me personally, it's probably something we should address because we didn't do examples on the fallow podcast, but like, so I try and say like ming, like M-I-N-G, so ming, ming, ming. And like, yeah, you can do it high pitch, low pitch, like how often you do it. Like there's some were sitting there and just like continuously doing it every 2 seconds, like chirping away, some a bit longer. I think like going back to more like the red deer one where it's like tone and timing and stuff, like the more high pitched and the more commonly you do it, the more like sort of urgent or like excited you are, I guess, is what I've found. Like if I'm just sitting on a scrape going, ming, 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 like you really sort of can get a buck going and stuff. So, but you're also, if you're just doing it one every so often, you might be letting other does know where you are and that type of thing. But yeah, I just laugh at people when, they're like, oh no, this is how you do it. And it's just like, mate, righto, like sure thing. You never argue with them because it's just something, but it's just like, yeah, I can assure you when you've heard 200 different fallow deer in one afternoon sitting there like chirping to each other and bucks croaking and stuff, like there is a huge variety of different sounds. But the thing is like, you don't want to sound different, I guess, is the main key that I took out of it. Like you want to sound the most similar to a doe, because like if there is any, like obviously being lower density now in the Southern Hemisphere, like if you do sound different, like they might come in and stuff, but they're like expecting to see a doe or whatever, and it might just put them on edge. Whereas like over there, it's like if you sound different, well, you're 2 meters off a buck, and so they're just trying to mate you anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Whereas like here, if you're going like wee 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 as your doe call or whatever, like I mean, it'd probably still work, but like a big old mature buck might be like, what's that? You know what I mean? And that's really the only takeaway I sort of took for how it changed my stuff here. Like I said, the tactics and everything was extremely different. But yeah, overall, there wasn't a huge amount like biologically that I could take away.
Having ticked off Bulgaria, I know it was a little while ago now, but do you have any like plans to return to Bulgaria for bow hunting in the future? Like if so, what would you do? Like would you be hunting the same species in fallow deer, or is there any attraction to go and hunt mouflon or anything like that? Yeah,
for sure. Like I definitely would love to get over there again. Bulgaria, or yeah, maybe even Hungary or Italy or something like that. Definitely a hunt that I'd be pretty keen to do with you, just so we could like really film it. Like, you know what I mean? Like book as 2 separate hunters, but like come on each other's hunt like a week apart or something like that. Probably the biggest thing for me would be trying to organize it just with what I've got going on in the US and what I'm trying to accomplish there, like trophy wise and stuff. Like, like elk and muleys and, antelope and all those, black bear and stuff, moose, like all those things are really like high on the list and really hard to hunt. Like it's not like you just go, oh yeah, I'm going to book like a 4-day hunt like what we just did, or a 5-day hunt in Bulgaria to shoot a fallow to go and hunt an elk. Like, you know what I mean? This is really like, hey, I've got 2 tags for elk and I'm prepared to give 35 to 40 days for each of them or both of them together. So like that time is probably the biggest factor. Not to say that like definitely one day I would be really, 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 really keen to go back there and film it with you. But yeah, just when that happens, it just depends. But I mean, to experience a rut like that again is definitely something I want to do. Numa Outdoors is our camouflage clothing of choice. The team has formulated a durable, breathable, quiet and comfortable camouflage lineup, suitable for all terrains, season and pursuits, with a great pattern to keep you concealed. You may have recently seen us running the Renegade lineup in our recent adventures up north. We're pleased to announce that Numa products are available in Australia, so head to Venture Hunting Outdoors website to check them out for yourself.
Perfect. Well, that sort of seems to wrap up a lot of the chat about Bowhunting Bulgaria. I guess for those of you that are interested in Bowhunting Bulgaria, there's also like Hungary, Austria, Spain, Italy, as James mentioned. So there's plenty of different European hunts. I know a lot of people have obviously gone to the UK and hunting species like roe deer. So there's so much on offer, as is the case with anywhere. But it is great to sort of unpack an international adventure like this and discuss all things bow hunting Bulgaria. What we might do now is I've just gone through our YouTube comment section, and there seems to be sort of like an overwhelming sense of a question that a lot of people are asking on there in regards to the Bowhunting Bulgaria film. But yeah, I just wanted to urge people to obviously go over there, watch the film. It's going to be action packed, and ahead of, by the time this launches in March, like the rut's just around the corner. So seeing some big Bulgarian fallow bucks croaking and fighting and everything will obviously get you pretty amped up for that, and what's to come here in Australia. But as always, if you have a frequently asked question that you want answered by either James or myself, then please just email info@twinelements.com.au with the subject line FAQ, or simply send either myself or James, which is like Ayden or James Doumtsis Outdoors, or the Twin Elements Instagram account. Just send us a DM and we'll strive to get back to you on there. One other question that we've got from the YouTube series is, were they good to you being a bow hunter? I have experienced that some European outfitters can get impatient with bow hunters.
Yeah, so I think with our guides and stuff like that, like I sort of alluded to before, Mehmed was like phenomenal. He actually had a camera as well. So like some of the footage that you see is from stuff that he'd filmed for me and stuff. Like he was really good in all aspects, like hunting, filming. Like there was like days that I was like, no, stuff it. Like, because I was, like I said, like earlier on, I was trying to trial all these tactics that, to see if a concept would work, sort of thing. Like I said, like, getting to the lek late, or staying out all day, or hunting bucks in the thick stuff. And he was for all of it. Like actually a bit of a funny behind the scenes thing that I don't know if I put it in there, but in the actual film, but there was one day that I was like, nah, stuff it. We're staying out all day. And so we, like, you told the lovely kitchen or staff, and they made us lunch and all this stuff, which was really nice. And I remember like opening up I took a bite out of this sandwich, and I'll never forget it. And I remember like opening it up, and it was ham, cheese, and butter. And I literally list butter as like an ingredient, because there was probably like a 4 mil piece of cheese in like the actual like thing. And there was like an actual stick of butter, where it was like probably an 8 mil thick cut cube of butter, like in this sandwich. And I remember just taking a bite and just being like, obviously like, glue essentially in your mouth, and just like spitting it at me, like, what the F was that? Like, and then just like opening it up and just like looking at it. And I'm like sitting like against this rock on the lek, like eating a sandwich or whatever. And just like, pissing myself laughing, like, oh, like what the hell is that? And I just remember just like peeling this butter off and just like maybe using like a little bit on some of the bread or whatever, and then just like throwing it away. But I think in our situation, most of the guides were like, we'd sort of outlined to the translators and stuff and the managers of a hunt, like, hey, we're all like very, competent hunters. We don't need to be babied. Like we don't need, like pretty much just take us to the lek, and like a second person is going to be more of a hindrance than a help. And so they were really respectful and good around that. But they were also, like my guide specifically, like I can only really talk to my guide because he was the only one that I used, but he was fantastic. Like he was super patient. Like I said, like there was days where we'd be coming back from a hunt or going to a hunt and stuff, and he'd let me like film him driving B-roll scenes and stuff, and let me, like he was super, whatever I wanted to do, he would let me do. So I had nothing but time for him and his service. And like, it was one of the things that I look fondly back of, like our sort of, like I said, our interactions and struggling to translate, and, like they're fond memories I look back on from the hunt.
It's interesting too, because like I can sort of often, I think in this case, like obviously having Benny Solaris go there and sort of pave the way for you guys to come on through, potentially a year later, and then as a big group of 8 bow hunters over a 2-week period, you do get the grace of like, he's set the tone as to, we're competent. We've just shot a Bulgarian archery record as a group. These guys know what they're doing. Like I've handpicked them. They're guys that are going to come and respect the culture and everything, and then obviously hunt the right way and stuff like that, and have good morale in camp. And I think, as you've said, the guides and like the lodge and everything is sort of cottoned onto that, and they obviously accommodate for bow hunting. They know what it's about, as you said, with like the guides and things like that. Whereas if you do go and do an international trip, and there hasn't been this, to be honest, it's a luxury that Benny's obviously established this, and this is why bow hunting in Bulgaria has become more popular for Aussies recently, because you do see a lot of people going over and hunting in Hungary and Spain and all these places. But to be honest, I've seen a lot more rifle hunters go over there, where the benefits of having a rifle does make the hunt quite considerably easier, in my opinion. And I think it's just a fact. Like if you can go over there and you can shoot an animal from 100 meters, it's going to be a lot easier than trying to stalk in, particularly if you do have guides and things that aren't necessarily competent to bow hunting and are rushing you. Because similar to what you were alluding to there towards the end of your hunt where you do shoot the buck, it's almost like it probably sounded like for them, they were like, finally, this last hunter has successfully shot a buck. Like, let's get in there, cape it out so we can go back to camp. And, you know, if they were in Greece, they'd be having ouzos and things and then celebrating the hunt. And because for them, that's what they're obviously about, is providing like an experience where everyone goes home happy with a trophy and stuff. And the fact that you've drawn this hunt out and taken a buck on the last hour is magical for you. But for them, they're probably stressing a little bit. Like, is this guy going to shoot a buck? Is he going to be happy? Is he not? Do you know what I mean? So I think a lot of like the stresses and things that, you know, guides put on their clients, and this is talking as someone that, you know, obviously does spotted safaris and the chittledy hunts. Like if I have someone come up on a hunt and they say like, hey, I've done this, and this, like I'm quite confident at spotting and stalking, and they want to try the first day or two of doing it their way, I'll 100% do it. But if I notice that after day 1 or 2 on stalks, it should have gone a certain way, you know, things aren't going well, I'll say like, look, for the success of the hunt, like, and maybe at the compromise of someone's ego, like, do you want to jump in behind me and I'll run you through this stalk and get you into 30 meters, and then you can step out and do whatever you want to do and obviously take the shot. And it's just, sometimes we don't like hearing it. Like I've been on, you know, buffalo trips and hunts and things where, you know, you walk for the first 3 days and you don't see a single animal, or you see plenty of animals, but because you've only walked 10 kilometers for the day or 20 kilometers for the day, you don't see the big, you know, potential mature bull that you're after. And then you spend a day driving around and you find 20 big bulls that you'd happily shoot all of them. And it just depends on sort of what I'm trying to say here is like what type of hunt you want. Like if you're not focused on, and it's different because it's obviously international and here, but if you're not interested in shooting a 100-point buffalo from the side of, you know, spotting it from a car, then walking 10Ks and shooting a 90-point buffalo is going to be the type of hunt that you want. Whereas if you are sort of sitting here going, it's all about the trophy potential for me, and you're not necessarily as important as shooting like the animal spot and stalk and finding it without it ever knowing you're there, then like there's all these factors that go into guided hunts that can make it quite tricky, especially because not everyone hunts the same, which is probably the biggest takeaway from that question there. But thank you very much for sending that in. Secondly, this question was like by far the most asked question, and we've obviously tried to answer it on the YouTube, but for everyone listening here today, we've sort of left it as the last thing that we'll do for the show. And we've touched on it a fair bit, but what outfitter did you use on this hunt? And I'll let you answer that. But also we will chuck, you know, the details in the show notes so that if you are someone that wants to go on, you know, a trip like this, hopefully all this information and stuff is still relevant and accurate. But if not, I'm sure you can send us a message and we can put you in touch with, you know, who you need to be in touch with.
Yeah, so as I've mentioned a couple of times, Benny Solaris obviously pioneered the way. So he's done a lot of, like an incredible amount of international hunts, working in Europe at the time. So it was like very easy access for him to do a lot of these hunts. And he's created a bit of a network and a company called Silent Pursuits, where he sort of helps people go and just do the hunts that he's done, I guess, and just connects outfitters to like guys and girls in the South Pacific. So if you do want to book a hunt in Bulgaria, I think it was Bulgarian Hunt Consultant or something like that, or Hunt Service. I think, yeah, Bulgarian Hunt Service was the actual outfitter over there. But yeah, you have to book through Benny, I'm pretty sure. So I would, look up either Benny Solaris or look up Silent Pursuits, and that's who you need to speak to about booking a hunt in Bulgaria.
I've got here that their website is silentpursuits@gmail.com. So we'll just make sure that that's still relevant, obviously, and then we'll put all these details for you in the show notes and the description and stuff like that. To conclude, thank you very much, guys, for listening to this podcast. We hope that you guys can obviously take something away from it. Today was a bit of a film breakdown with Bowhunting Bulgaria, but also the first of our interview-styled sort of question and answer chats between James and I, where we're obviously, we've done a lot of hunting here in Australia and abroad, as you can tell. So this is something that we're pretty keen to do within one another, because like I've found out a lot here today that I didn't quite know about this hunt, which has been great. And if you guys do get a chance to get out over the fallow deer rut and red deer roar, which is coming up now, we're in March, it's going to obviously intensify in April. Please keep us posted. Make sure that you're sharing your images and stories with us on social media and whatnot. We would love to share them with our other listeners and viewers, particularly if you learned something from, one of the podcasts, particularly the fallow rut tactics or red raw tactics podcast, where we do a bit of a deep dive into some tips and strategies for hunting them during the rut and raw respectively. We just want to kind of, run off the back of all these podcasts and really generate some momentum and community-based sort of spirit.
Righty, guys. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Twin Elements podcast. A few little housekeeping issues. So a lot of you guys are probably aware we've got our Fallow Frenzy film series dropping every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time on our YouTube. This week it will be part 3 dropping, so make sure to chime in and check that one out. Some pretty cool encounters. Hopefully you guys have listened to the podcast as well and have that full breakdown and understand what's going to be happening, but also just more detail and insight into why we were successful or not successful in certain stalks. So make sure to check out that episode. That was last week on the podcast. We've had a few podcasts in the last couple of weeks with fallow deer and red deer, so hopefully we've set you guys up and put you in a position knowledge-wise to be successful on this rut.
Speaking of our YouTube, we're nearing 20,000 subscribers on the platform. So as part of this, we'll obviously be doing a giveaway, which we're pretty hyped about this year in 2025. We've already done our 10K followers giveaway. So thank you very much to everyone that obviously supported us over there. Make sure that you're listening for all updates across our socials, but we do have a pair of Ranger GTX3 boots up for grabs from our friends at Lower, as well as some other branded prizes. For example, we're hoping to bulk that package up, speak to our partners and brands that sponsor us and whatnot, and then obviously extend those just generosities over to you guys. In all of our YouTube links and descriptions and things, we have links for the discounts as well as these show notes. So if you're after a pair of boots, if you're after coffee, Atlas Wild, anything like that, make sure you jump over, use our codes. Not only does it support us and show the brands that, we're creating a wider community, but it also gets the good stuff in your hands.
So this weekend is the big event that we've been talking about for quite a while now, the Flow State Outdoor Expo down at Wodonga. Up on the New South Wales Vic border. So it's expected to be a huge day. There's some great vendors and lineups. Ayden and I are going to be there. We're going to be doing a Q&A podcast with Wade, Adam Greentree and Nick Morton. So that will be awesome. Pretty sure the wild dining experience, if it hasn't sold out already, will be very close to. So that's a wild dining experience presented by Yeti, which will be run between 5 and 7 p.m. I'm pretty sure tickets have sold out though, but check, you might be one of the lucky few to get one of the lucky last tickets. But yeah, it's going to be an awesome day. If you're within a couple of hours drive to this, make sure to come down and say hey and check it out. Ayden and I are going to be selling some prints there, so make sure to come in down to the booth and say hello. But you also do have only a couple more days to buy one of those early bird tickets, which puts you into the draw to win a Spotted Safaris hunt valued at $6,000 with Ayden and I, and Wade coming along to film the whole experience for you. So make sure you've only got a couple of days left now. If you haven't bought a ticket, you need to buy one. There's some incredible prizes that will also be drawn on the night, but they've opened the hunt giveaway up to anyone holding an early bird ticket. So even if you treat it as a raffle, the odds are pretty good that you may win the hunt wherever you are in the world or Australia. And so make sure to jump onto the Flow State website, follow through the links and grab an early bird ticket to be in the chance to come on a hunt with Ayden and I.
Yeah, I'm very excited to see everyone there this Saturday, March 1st, as James said. We're going to have our Spotted Safaris and Twin Elements booth, so make sure you drop in, say g'day, and it'll be a great day for all involved in the hunting, fishing and outdoor community. Lastly, I just wanted to say a massive thank you for everyone's support. The podcast really seems to have been ramping up, particularly from probably episode 5, where we were starting to get a bit of traction. Resolution, I've had a lot of people message me back and ask for tips on training and just some little exercises they can do, as well as saying that it was perfect timing and a bit of a motivation booster for them and their New Year's resolutions. So just receiving that sort of information is massive for us, as well as hopefully, all the tips and tactics that we talk about in these podcasts with the red and fallow rut tactics being implemented in this coming March and April. We'll just see more success for hunters and people learning and doing things, hopefully the right way. But if you can please continue to subscribe, review, and rate the podcast, we're really appreciating it. Especially on Spotify, where in individual podcasts, you can leave like comments and things like that. We do see them. And as I've just suggested and said, that we are extremely thankful for everyone's support regarding this.
Yeah, it's not a day goes by now that I don't get a message about the podcast. So thank you very much for all your support. We really do appreciate it. It's just building that community. We're getting a lot more questions, and it just helps us sort of, share our knowledge even further. So thank you very much for tuning in on another episode of the Twin Elements podcast, and we'll catch you next time.
I should say thank you as well to James, who was a guest host on his own podcast. But in all seriousness, thank you guys, and hopefully someone out there can get out for a hunt in Bulgaria. Cheers.
Thanks, guys. Bye.